loves, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well. Today I just wanted to do a quick chatty video about some maybe unpopular book opinions. I don't know, you need to tell me that, but I think some of these might be controversial, or at least I've heard people say the exact opposite of what my thoughts are on these topics. And I just thought it would be really fun to discuss them, because that's what we're here for, right? For having discussions about books and about reading. And even if we might disagree on some aspects of it, we all love reading, and that's the most important thing. So grab your favorite beverage and let's talk about some bookish opinions. And hey, if any of these totally resonate with you, or you're like, what the heck? I really disagree with this, then feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's chat about it. The first one isn't really an opinion, it's just something that is the way it is with me and my personal reading. And that is, I don't have any book boyfriends or book girlfriends for that matter. And I know for some people that might be a concept that is really hard to grasp, but for me, the other way around, it's really hard to grasp why people have book boyfriends or what that even is really supposed to mean. I mean, to me, that means I could see myself being with that person and I would want them to be my partner. And honestly, I don't even know why, but that just doesn't work for me at all. I know so many people are obsessed with their fictional crushes, and I get it. Some people in books are really cool and described as really attractive, but I often hear people talk about how dreamy their book boyfriends are and how they're totally in love with them. And I just don't get it. I mean, I kind of get it because you have parasocial relationships with celebrities and stuff as well, but especially in romance books, I don't really get it because I want the guy to be with the partner they have in the book. That's why I'm reading this, because I think these two people are so compatible. And if I were like, oh, I really want to be with that guy, either I would have to really see myself in the FMC or their partner, whatever, or I would just have to think that the couple isn't right for each other, and that then to me just wouldn't be a good romance. So I just really root for their relationships if I like them. That's my take on this. And I admire their actions in books, and I admire the way they are as a person and their character traits, but that doesn't mean I would want to be with them. I want them to be with the heroine or the hero of the story. And to me, a lot of the attraction to a person comes from the interaction with them. Obviously, I don't know, that's kind of how it is, right? You can't just really look at someone from the outside and be in love with them. I think it largely depends on people interact with each other, and people don't interact with each other in the same way. So if he or she is treating the person in the book right, that doesn't mean that they would treat me the same way, if you know what I mean. It's this very specific relationship that is making this book so great, and this person and this book. And I know I'm really overthinking this, and it's probably just about, oh my god, this person in this book is just so cute and they are just so nice and they're treating everyone so well, or even the opposite. And especially in dark romance, I think it's so funny when people are like, this is my book boyfriend, and I'm like, no, that's not what you want. But yeah, I get it. It's just a fantasy. Still, to me, as nice as they are, fictional people just don't really do it for me. My second opinion is book to movie adaptations aren't as trashy as people say they are. I really have to defend filmmakers here, okay? So I studied media design, and we also talked a lot about transmedia design and how that works and how to take something from one medium and then translate it to another as well. So there's so many layers to this. But what it really comes down to is that when books are being adapted to films, that is a totally new medium. And I think people expect that to work like their mind works and how their imagination works, but that's not how films work, right? And you have to make certain creative decisions, and I honestly don't think that films should just try to adapt the book as accurately as possible. I think that is not what's fun about book adaptations. I think what really is something that is the beauty of translating something to a new form of media is that you will always have to cut things out, and you have to add things in, and you have to find a new take on it, and you have to make your own interpretation of the piece. And of course you can disagree with that interpretation, but just expecting it to be the exact same thing is just not fair, and it takes away from the creativity of the directors and the actors and everybody who's involved in making films, because they might see something in a character or in a story that you don't see, and it really gives you as the viewer the chance to see the material in a new light as well. And I think that's really beautiful. Of course, there are definitely films that are book to movie adaptations that just are plain bad and where things didn't work. And that might be because people are not familiar enough with the source material. It might be because the production didn't have enough funding. It's because of just things happening along the way, poor planning, stuff like that. Just how film productions sometimes go. And then to say, I didn't like this, is obviously fine. And it's obviously fine if you didn't enjoy the book to movie adaptation of your favorite books. But I also don't think it's fair to throw all of the adaptations under the bus and say you didn't like it just because it didn't exactly match the book. I think it's really important to go into this open-minded and know for sure that it's not going to be the same thing. Okay, the next one I know is going to be really unpopular with fantasy readers because it's about fantasy books, and my opinion is that fantasy books in general could just be a little bit shorter a lot of the time. I think fantasy books often drag on a bit, and I know that this is a really personal preference and a lot of people love this about fantasy books, but to me it just makes the reading experience, I don't know. I really like fast-paced fantasy books that are not over-explaining things, which is one of the things that happens a lot in fantasy books. And I'm all for world building, really, but sometimes there are too many details. And if you're a huge fan of a series, of course, that can be really great. But some fantasy books just tell you the color of every single stone and leaf that you can find on the ground of this particular world. And that is not necessary. It's really not. And sometimes it just feels like it's never going to end. And I'm just like, where's the story? Let's go forward with the plot, please. And I know some people really love the deep dive into the magical systems and the political intrigue, and I think that's all fine. And I also enjoy that, but I also enjoy a good tight plot. And so often we have these info dumps in fantasy where everything is explained to you at once, and often it's just a character telling you. And I don't think that's very creative. And to me, it just makes it so hard to focus and also to remember all of these things, because if somebody tells me a bunch of history facts, I can't even remember that if it's about our history. And if it's about a fictional world, might even be a little bit easier, to be honest, but then there are so many names and so many people, and sometimes less is just more, or divided up. And I don't think it's necessarily the length of the book in itself, because I have enjoyed really long fantasy books, but some are just too dry and I can't do it. And the book can still be epic without being 1,000 pages long. It is possible. It is possible to have a good story and a good plot and interesting characters and interesting world building without all of this. And of course there are long series, as I've said, that are really great and that have great writing and where none of the stuff that I just said applies. But I still feel like sometimes there is just this expectation that fantasy books have to be longer, and that's why authors write them longer, and why there isn't more editing or things are being cut out because you feel like you have to reach a certain page count, word count, whatever, and it is not edited down as much as, for example, literary fiction. And I feel like if you take these certain expectations away from genres, that there can be much more freedom in making the creative choices, and it can really make books better if you don't pretend like it has to be that way. So yeah, I think some good editing and cutting out unnecessary stuff can really help and can make a story better. But that's just my opinion, and of course every genre has its things, and again, this is also just personal preference. Okay, the next one is a bit obvious, but I still feel like some people think it's not true. And my opinion is, I don't think it is necessary to read a book in one sitting or read it quickly to really love it and enjoy that book. I think especially here on YouTube and also on Instagram and TikTok, it can always seem like people are reading so fast. And I know people say that about me too. And I do read fast, but that doesn't mean I finish books fast, and I don't finish all books fast. But that doesn't mean that I love them less or that my reading experience isn't good. And especially if I'm reading longer books. Like, for example, right now I'm reading the Crescent City series, the third part in it. And that is such a long one. And I already knew that it was going to take me probably 2 months to get through this, because I just don't tend to read books this long in one sitting. And I've waited for so long to read this book. I also don't want it to be over that quickly. I want to really drag out the process and think about all of the little details. And I know I just said long fantasy books, but if I'm choosing to read one of those, I really want to take my time with it and don't pressure me to read it that fast. Or even with shorter books as well, it's okay to take breaks. If you're just not feeling a book in the moment, sometimes it's just better to take a break and then restart it or continue it later on when you have the mental capacity to do it, or when you are just really feeling it again, when you get excited about it again. And there have been books that I haven't finished over the course of half a year, and I still really enjoyed it. I think we romanticized the idea of binge reading a lot, and I get it. I also like finishing books fast if I'm really drawn into it and I have the time to do it, which is also a really huge thing, because some people also don't have the time in their day to read that much, and that is totally fine. And that doesn't mean that you should just pick up books that you can finish in a day or two, because that's the only way you can enjoy them. And I think it also has a lot to do with our society and capitalism and consumerism, and how that affects our perception of goods or of objects in general. That we always have the idea of, I need to do everything faster, I need to be more productive. And if I'm not productive, or I'm not doing the thing in the same time that other people are doing it, that means I'm not good at it or not enjoying it as much as they do. And that is not what hobbies are about. So taking your time with books and actively practicing not doing everything fast and not doing everything in a way that feels like you achieve something can be really difficult, because we are trained to do it. And I don't want to say that I don't do these things, because I'm definitely also doing them. I like setting goals for myself and I like achieving them, and there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself. But just if you feel any pressure or you start comparing yourself to people on the internet, then just know that all people have different life circumstances, and other people just enjoy consuming media in different ways. and that is fine. And if you just like reading your books and that is the way that brings you the most joy, that's totally fine as well. But I just think that sometimes it's portrayed in a way that if you put a book down and you pause it, that means you should instantly DNF it and read something else, or your enjoyment of the book was lesser than, and that's just not always true. Of course it can be, but to me it's not always true. And I also like reading different books at the same time. I like having different books to pick from, different genres I'm reading at the same time for different moods, because I'm a huge mood reader, and as long as you are enjoying the way that you're reading, you're doing it right. And my last bookish opinion for today is I don't like reading books about characters who love books. And that one, again, is very personal. But I always feel like if I'm reading this, I often feel like it's such an easy way for an author to try and make a character quirky and relatable. Because you're a reader, right? So if you're reading about someone who loves reading, you feel connected to them. Like, we get it. It makes you feel like, oh, they're one of us. But I feel like it's just so overdone. There are so many books about people who enjoy reading and about people who write books and about people who work in the publishing industry. And of course, there's a saying, write what you know. And people do that. They write about their experience. And if you're an author, that experience involves books. But there are other ways that you can give a character a backstory and relatability, and other ways to make them interesting. I'd rather read about a character that has other interests where I'm learning something new and that might be way out of the box than reading another story about somebody who just is a fan of books and likes reading in their free time all the time. And I guess it's fine if it's just a thing that is mentioned in passing and it's not the whole book that is centered around it, or if it's done in a very unique way and the character has a relationship with books that feels more complex than just saying, she's reading and that's it. Because often that's it. It just doesn't get me anymore. It doesn't make me feel related to that person. It's just not interesting to me anymore. And of course, there are books that do it really well and where the books are such an important part of the storyline and where it's all thought through, like The Book Thief by Markus Zusak wouldn't work without books being a huge part of it. I don't mean that. I just mean that if you're using books as an easy way out to make a character likable, and it just doesn't work for me. And to me, it's the same thing with involving Taylor Swift in your story and in your title or anything like that, which I think is something that is so overdone nowadays, and I get it. She's a huge pop phenomenon, and I love her, but even to me, as somebody who is a Swiftie, it gets annoying. And I don't want to know how it is for people who don't enjoy her music or cannot relate to any of the Easter eggs in the books. That must be so annoying. And again, I often feel like that's a cheap way of saying, oh, we found this thing that is really popular among readers, so let's just put this into all of the books now. And it worked in one book, so we're going to use it for every single one now. And I don't like it when the marketing is that obvious, and if you can tell that it was done that way only to market the book better to readers, and it genuinely has nothing to do with the story in and of itself, that to me is kind of the same level with involving books and reading in storylines. So I don't know if you can relate to that, or if you have experienced something similar, that there are some trends in books, and especially in romance books, I feel, that are just a bit overdone. I know some of you are probably going to agree with me and some are going to be like, no, not at all. But that's what makes book discussions so fun, right? And now I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you already thought about any of these? What are your opinions? Do you agree? Do you disagree? you have something to add, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss any of the future videos. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye!